So, beginning with my personal SEL practices reflection, the personal SEL practice that I selected to try was a body scan for sleep. This was something that was shared with us early on in the course. And I really kind of latched on to the idea of doing these body scans. There is a link that you can go to from this website, and you can listen to this recording that asks you to check into different parts of your body one by one. And so my goal with this SEL implementation plan was to do at least 2 body scans per week to help me sleep, to kind of help me wind down after the stressful days that I have. And I was going to do them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. How well was I able to implement this personal practice plan? I actually did this with integrity. I was able to do it for the whole 3 weeks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And part of what helped me keep to this was I set an alarm for myself. Um, and I knew that when that alarm went off, whatever I was doing, I needed to stop it and get ready for bed. And so it kind of became part of my evening routine rather than just kind of like falling asleep on the couch or accidentally going to sleep. I made sure that on those nights I went through this routine of the body scan. My experiments with this, or my experience with this, was I enjoyed it. I liked how, even though I did have to force myself to do it with integrity, I was able to give myself permission to really just focus on my own social and emotional well-being. Okay. What I liked about the body scans was it was kind of just me time where I could just get in bed, play the recording, turn off the lights, and really just check in with my body and my emotions. And I realized that I really don't do that a lot. I'm kind of a person who bottles things up and then doesn't release them. I feel like those body scans really helped me get that release. And it was really some of the best sleep that I've gotten in a while. So I give them a thumbs up. What did I learn about myself and my social emotional competence through this process? So I learned that I definitely really struggle with the self management side of SEL. I'm very self aware. I think I'm socially aware. I have good relationship skills. I pride myself on my ability to build relationships in my classroom. Decision making, again, is something that I'm confident in, but where I struggle with is my own stress management. Again, I'm a bottler up of emotions. I'm the kind of person who, just because of how I was raised, I was kind of taught to keep things in, and that definitely weighs heavy on my conscience. And I sometimes don't realize how much weight and how much anxiety and how much of a burden it is to not experience those like self-care, stress relieving types of activities. So I learned that I struggle with self-management definitely more than I like to admit. How can I sustain this practice beyond this course? I can do more of these body scans. And the thing that I love about them is they're like so easy to do. The hardest part about them is finding the time for it. I don't know if I'll continue with every Tuesday and Thursday because that was a bit of a struggle. Sometimes I'm lesson planning late and sometimes I'm at the gym. But I like how it's something that I can kind of just incorporate and add in as needed. And it doesn't take much work at all. So I put this gif of a tree because I want to branch out and just do it more as I carry on after this course. So as far as my class-wide SEL practices, I chose to do opening rituals. Opening rituals are a way that you begin your class period with community building, a welcoming and inclusion activity to bring the voice of every participant into the room. And where I got these opening rituals from was from Wayfinder, which is an SEL program that I'm helping to pilot in my school district. Wayfinder conveniently has hundreds of opening rituals in their database. And so it was easy for me to kind of just pick the ones I wanted to do for this capstone. I was planning to do an opening ritual with Wayfinder from Wayfinder 3 times a week for these 3 weeks. So Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays were the days that I had scheduled it. And I was also successful in holding true to this goal and doing them with integrity Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 3 weeks. And I originally planned to just do them with one of my class periods, but it worked so well and it was so easy to incorporate that I ended up eventually using them for all 3 of my classes in the last 2 weeks. Something that went well, the Wayfinder curriculum is so easy to use. It's very engaging, and it really takes the guesswork out of SEL, which I think is the part that teacher struggles with the most, which is, at least for me, is what do I do? How do I do it? The program that that we're piloting at my school is very, very well laid out. My sophomores responded very well, and I noticed that doing the opening rituals allowed them to open up more, and they kind of started to just embrace the awkwardness and open up to the community more. Something that was a little bit challenging was I felt that I needed to have something else to help me transition from the opening ritual to, okay, well, now we're learning about World War II, or here's this community activity that we did, and now we have to jump into content. So I'm still kind of not really sure how to make myself feel comfortable with that. Maybe it's just being not familiar with doing it, but I feel because I am a content teacher, I'm a subject teacher, um, I did struggle making that through line from the SEL lesson to the history content lesson. Something else that was challenging was my first period juniors were a little bit more guarded because it's first period. They're sleepy, they don't want to get up, they don't want to talk, they don't want to move around. They did eventually warm up to it, but it was a little bit more of a struggle with my first period. And it was also challenging to collect data. When I set out on this capstone plan, I originally wanted to do a poll on Pear Deck where it would gather the students' responses, and I'd have that hard data. But with time constraints, it was a little bit difficult to do that. So I had to come up with a little bit less formal way of gathering data. So I feel like if I were to do this longer, I would want a little bit more concrete data. So this actually brings us to data. So instead of the form that I wanted my students to do on Pear Deck, which would log their answers for me, I kind of just did a simplified method where after each opening ritual, I had the students put their heads down and I said thumbs up if you gained something from activity, thumbs to the side if you felt like the activity was meh, and thumbs down if you were like, I hated that, let's never do it again. And for every opening ritual that we did, the majority were the thumbs ups and thumbs to the sides. And the few students who had a thumbs down were, maybe just students who weren't in the mood that day, but it was very, very rare. It was usually thumbs up or at least thumb to the side. Did I incorporate a continuous improvement mindset? I definitely did. Explicit SEL is not my comfort zone. Again, I've kind of always prided myself on building relationships with my students and that kind of carrying us through with SEL rather than explicitly teaching my students the competencies. So it was going to be a struggle for me, and I definitely did have to coach myself through fumbling a little bit, trying it, making myself open, because I knew that if I was open-minded, my students were more likely to be. What changes, shifts, and improvements did I make? Again, I liked it so much that instead of just doing one class, I ended up trying it with all of my class periods. Again, I mentioned my first period, they did not appreciate the movement because some of the activities required them to get up and mill around, but they did come around to it. And I also listened to them and adapted a little bit. I modified some activities to where they could just do it in their small groups rather than moving around the whole room. Something else that required a shift was after one of the sharing activities, where the students were allowed to either pass or share, and practically everyone in my first period passed. I realized that they maybe weren't ready for that yet, so I shifted back to more team and collaborative opening rituals rather than the ones that were more about self awareness. And instead of getting like scared and never doing them again, though, I did circle back to those activities, but instead of doing them every day, I did just one a week. And I did notice that by the third time, the students were a little bit more comfortable because it was something that was a little bit more familiar. And there were fewer passes, um, especially that third time around. So, what did my students do, or I'm sorry, how did the students experience the practice? My students participated in 9 of the Wayfinder opening rituals, and these were introduce yourself twice. This was where students had to introduce themselves to everyone in the class with their name and then also with a hand gesture or a handshake. There was mix and mingle where I had the students again travel the room and they had to respond to would you rather questions with the different students in the room. Mountains and valleys was one of the ones where the students had to give a high for the week and a low, and some of the students passed. Dice of motion was a fun game where you roll a dice and the students have to form groups with that number. So whatever the die rolls, if it lands on 2, they have to form groups of 2, and then they have to share a question. There's group count where the students had to all count to 10 without repeating a number. Scribble wars where one student starts a drawing, they pass it to the next person in their group, they add to it. Find Someone Who is a game about finding commonalities. In this opening ritual, I would give the students a prompt like find someone who has the same number of siblings as you. And they'd have to mill around the room talking until they found someone who did. And then lastly was 20 questions, where it's that typical game where you think of something and the person has 20 questions to guess what it is that you're thinking about. I did notice that by doing these rituals, my class and my students seemed more cohesive, especially as I had just given them new seats the week before. My students now know everyone's names. After the mix and mingle activities, I was able to kind of have students like address each other by name more than before. For some of the sillier opening rituals, I had students smile who never smile. And I do generally think that the students appreciated the opportunity to connect, even though at the surface it maybe seemed uncool. I know that based on the thumbs up, thumbs to the side, at the very least, they appreciated being able to chat with their peers. I will absolutely continue these practices in my classroom. And I learned about myself that I really struggle, again, similar to self awareness. I really struggle with the TSEL adult competency 1B5, recognizing, understanding, and labeling my own emotions. Again, I am like not the kind of, I would be the student who passed. Like if I had to go around and share my mountain and my valley, I would pass. And this really required me to step out of my comfort zone and stretch myself for my students. In conclusion, my overall reflection is I would not say that I gained any new understandings about SEL, but I did gain understanding of myself as a practitioner of SEL and also how my SEL competence directly connects to my students' competence. I found that it was beneficial to work on my personal practice and classroom practice because I was able to use what I learned about both to inform each other. For example, body scan, I used that in my class before the quiz. Really quick, the students were asking questions. I could tell they were anxious, and I had them put their heads down and I led them through a quick 1 minute body scan before the quiz. I think the obvious next step for me is to try to do opening rituals daily and then eventually opening and closing rituals. The struggle with that is going to be finding the time to also teach my content. But I love how the Wayfinder program has a lot of built in lessons and curriculum that make it easier for me to be able to multitask and do both SEL and also history, which is what I teach. So, thank you for listening to my capstone implementation reflection. The end.